Welcome. So we have here our fireside chat. I'm Christy Harkin. I'm here with Jed McCaleb, and we are here to talk about the future of payments, networks, scalability, challenges, and solutions. So Jed, what would you like to start with? Do you want to tell us how Stellar is sort of playing a role in the payment system?
Yeah, hi. For those not familiar, Stellar is basically designed for payments specifically. So it's designed to build sort of an internet level protocol to send money around the world. If you dig into how money moves around the world now, it's very much pre-internet, and Stellar is a way to make that much more modern, where it makes it where every kind of payment network in the world, like ACH, SEPA, mobile money things, is compatible with other ones, right? So it makes it where it's all interoperable. So it shouldn't matter what kind of currency you have, whether you have like dollars or euros or Bitcoin or whatever. You should be able to interoperate with people on the other side of the world seamlessly without having to bother know what they're using, right? And so that's kind of the design behind Stellar and the reason why we set out to do it. So yeah.
I'm noticing that on the CoinDesk 20 top 20 currencies coins, that Stellar comes in at number 6 with a market cap of around what, 7.5 billion, roughly 7.6. Are you seeing the sort of adoption that you expected to see at this point in Stellar's development?
So I think crypto has kind of both surprised and disappointed me over the years. Like I think it's in a lot of ways, in many ways, it's like there's a lot more people that are aware of it and know about it, but there's less people that are actually using it than I was hoping, and this is true of all crypto and Stellar also. I think I was hoping at this point there would be actually more real use, where people were actually using this in their day-to-day lives, and that just hasn't been true. And I think there's a lot of reasons for why that's the case, and there's a lot of things that we're doing now at Stellar that I think that will go to address that. And because our goal has always been that we don't want to just make this technical project that's interesting because it's something new and novel, but we want to make something that's actually affecting people's lives and making them better, right? And so that's what we've been driving towards, and I think that's what we're getting to over the next year here. So. Are you there, Christy? I feel like Christy has dropped.
I did freeze there for a while. I'm back. It's been a little unstable here. So one of the things that you've been focused on has been working with regulations and governments, and that's an important point that you've made. In the past, you've said that making sure that it's useful for actual people is important, and that ultimately comes back to some sort of regulatory situation, and that at Stellar you're not avoiding regulation, you're trying to work within it. And that's something I've heard from other companies as well in the crypto space. What is the role of regulation for you, and why is it so important to work with regulations?
Well, I mean, it's just regulations are a fact of life, right? I mean, we most people that work at Stellar live in the US, and we can't really be afoul of the law. And so if regulators say you can't do a particular thing, then we really can't do it. I think the thing that I would want most from regulators is just a sense of clarity, like what things you can and can't do. I mean, I've been in this crypto space for a long time now, over 10 years. And one of the things that's really held it back is just it's been very unclear what things you can do and what things you can't do. And really, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like they're that interested in making it more clear than it was. I mean, they've done some things. It's more clear now than when I started, but still there's a lot of gray area and a lot of things that it just are uncertain. And this makes it harder to innovate. It makes it harder to build up on these things. It keeps out a lot of legitimate players that would otherwise jump in because it's just uncertain. So that's the biggest thing that we're kind of seeking from regulators and wanting is just clarity about what things are okay and what things are not, or what are the limits and that sort of thing. So and yeah, so.
We've seen a lot of governments who are embracing the idea of CBDCs and like the digital currencies, central bank digital currencies. Where does that sort of bump up against what we're doing?
Yeah, so basically, it depends on how these governments actually end up implementing this stuff. But Stellar is sort of designed for this kind of implementation. It's built to have other kind of forms of value or assets represented in the network, and then these things can trade against each other. That's all just a primitive feature of Stellar, so you don't need like some complicated smart contract thing. You can hold like a digital dollar or a digital euro or digital like Singapore dollar. All these things you can just put natively in the network. And so our original intent was that this would probably be done by like, remittance companies or mobile money things or banks, things like that. It would be awesome if central banks wanted to do this. I mean, that's kind of, then you eliminate a lot of the trust issues, because like if you have a digital dollar issued by some bank, you have to worry about, will this bank actually redeem it? But if it's by the actual central government, then it's just as trustworthy as the actual currency in the country. So that makes it quite a bit better. I mean, it's encouraging that central banks are exploring this kind of stuff. I think I think honestly, it's probably still years and years away, but it's good that they're open to the idea. I think it kind of validates all of crypto, I think. So.
Well, so we've talked about how there's regulations and that you're working within those regulations, and then we've got the central banks getting involved in payments. Well, obviously they've always been involved in payments, but in digital currency, using blockchains for as payment rails. And I wanted to kind of go back a little bit to your early Bitcoin roots, when you first would have gotten into cryptocurrency, and how, in a way, isn't all of this sort of antithetical to the original idea of Bitcoin payments, where you're sort of challenging the restrictions of regulation and challenging the legacy system? Sort of like, to what extent are we just building better databases for legacy financial systems as opposed to turning things on their head?
Right. So I mean, these things can always go like many different ways, and even Bitcoin. I mean, like on the one hand, it's like this very open, awesome system, but on the other hand, every payment address is public, so you can kind of like, once you start to like trace these things, you can see who's paying who and all this kind of stuff, right? It doesn't provide like perfect privacy, right? Which I think is a useful feature. So. I think the important thing is not necessarily to like be skirting regulation, but the important thing is to be able to have like the freedom to do lots of things that you couldn't do before. In the same way, like the internet didn't really like allow people just to break the law willy-nilly, but it did allow this interoperability piece, and like democratize access both to like publish information and to consume information, which was extremely transformative, right? And so this is kind of the same thing that like a Stellar enabled world would allow, is like, there would still be some regulatory checks on certain behavior, but it would be a much more interconnected world than it is now, where you'd be able to like pay people all over the world, and you'd be able to receive money from people all over the world. And this would just be a much better state of affairs, with like a lot lower friction and a lot lower expenses and faster, all this kind of stuff. So, I don't think it like really betrays the original, reason for Bitcoin to exist, which is essentially just more freedom, right? Maybe it doesn't go all the way to what some of the early Bitcoin pioneers wanted, which is, like, I'm just guessing that they would maybe want like complete economic freedom or not have to worry about any kind of law, but it's sort of that, but it's still very useful and beneficial for people, because there has to be some trade-off between like total anarchy and freedom from like these like central sources of power, essentially. So anyway, that's kind of a rambling answer, I guess.
Fair enough. I guess my thing is, what I'm looking for is, when I'm looking at all these different payment rails, is a way that we can kind of have a bit of both, get a bit of both worlds in there. And where does Stellar fit into sort of that, making a difference that way, and bringing, let's say, some of the other ethos of early Bitcoin days of the sort of global payments, making it easier to send things without censorship and restrictions. Is that possible in a regulated environment?
So, I mean, it depends on what the regulations ultimately end up being. I mean, I would hope that it would be possible. I mean, it's definitely possible on Stellar technically. Like you could, like it's essentially a superset of Bitcoin. Like you can send to anybody and these kind of pseudo-anonymous addresses, and you know, it has a native token, and you can use it that way, or you can use like digital dollars on the thing, and those are probably issued by some regulated entity that is maybe needs to do KYC when you withdraw it. Things like that. And so like you kind of have like this mix of both of these worlds where, you know, you can use things with a large degree of freedom, and even the regulated things you can use with a much larger degree of freedom than you have now, just by the nature of the technology, it just allows you to do more than what you could do traditionally, right? So so yeah, we do try to find this line between you know, making things like maximally free and still like be able to like have legitimate players on the network. So blew her mind.
So whereabouts in the world are you finding the bulk of your adoption and interest?
Yeah, so we've historically and today have been mostly focused on the developing world.
Sorry, did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard the question. Yeah, so we mostly focused on the developing world for several reasons. I mean, I think
I'm frozen or he's frozen. One of us is frozen.
Well, I don't know. I think you might be. I don't know, but I'll just keep talking. But yeah, so we've been historically focused on the developing world for a couple reasons. Like mainly, it's where the problems with sending money around is the greatest. Where you know, there's places like, you know, Nigeria where you know, 60+% of people don't have bank accounts and they depend really heavily on remittances. And when you go there and talk about something like Stellar, people really understand it because what they're coming from is so broken compared to what we have here. And so so the bulk of our activity is in places like Africa or Latin America or Southeast Asia. That's where we've done most of our work. Yeah, Christy, can you hear me now?
I'm back.
Okay,
I'm
great.
back. Sorry, it's been very windy up here and everything keeps getting knocked out.
Yeah, no
yeah. So that's where you've been finding it. And why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, so essentially just because, as I was kind of saying, like that money is just coming. It's similar to the reason why mobile phones took off way quicker in places like Indonesia or other places of the developing world, because they didn't have landlines already. So there wasn't something kind of okay that they were replacing. Like where they're starting from is just a much different place than where we're starting from here in like the US and Europe and stuff. So it's just solving a much greater pain point for them. And so I think, you know, I think for those reasons and a few others, like it just will take off faster there than it will like in the US and Europe, and it makes more sense to start there. And then the idea is like once you can kind of build a kernel of activity in somewhere else, then it can kind of like start growing towards the rest of the world, right? Like if you can get like, you know, Argentina, a lot of those people using Stellar, then now you can get like other places in South America using it, and then now you can get, you know, North America, and you can get other people. You can kind of snowball as you start to build from these communities, and that's kind of our strategy so far. So.
And are you seeing much institutional interest, or is that a growth area for you that you're focused on at all?
Yeah, we've worked with a lot of big institutions, and they continue to be interested. You know, I think for us, like, you know, like large banks or, you know, other large companies, they move quite slowly and they're very risk adverse. So I just don't think it's, you know, historically in other technologies, they're not the first ones to adopt it. I think it really is going to have to be proved out with smaller companies first before it moves to like larger institutions. But large institutions are obviously all interested in blockchain or whatever, and they'll have like innovation divisions that are looking at it, but really them putting it into practice is still some years out, and I think they're going to need to see it elsewhere in the world first. So we spend most of our effort with smaller tech companies. So.
And I know that you've got, there are developers who are building things on Stellar. What are some of the most interesting things that you're seeing being built, or innovative ways that people are using your platform?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool things being built. There's this card game in Korea called Lightment. That's pretty cool. It's like this fun card game that's built on Stellar. There's there's like a real estate, you can buy like fractions of real estate that's built on Stellar called Realty Bits. There's a lot of other things. I mean, but really, what's maybe not so exciting about it is I think the thing that's most interesting to me, or not maybe the most interesting, but the thing that I think needs to be built the most is just kind of the bread and butter stuff, just ways to get fiat on and off of the network, and just the very simple things like that. And once you have things like that, then it allows you to do all these other more complex things. It's just kind of like the bedrock that has to be there before this network is actually useful, is just like being able to like take your local currency, whatever it is, and like tokenize it and put it into the network. And from there, you can like move it around to other people that also have their local currency on it, and they can pull it out. This allows like cross-border payments. It allows like all these things to start happening. And once you have these things, then you can do all these kind of novel use cases on top of that. But that's like, it sounds like boring and simple, but it's kind of the fundamental thing that needs to happen first before you can go into all these things. So
100%. That's actually, I'm glad you brought all that up, because yeah, the games and the toys are fun. They're interesting,
right,
kind of quirky, but it's getting the bedrock of what it is that people are going to actually need in order to make it sort of consumer facing, make it useful, and having an interface that people understand and can recognize, and then be able to use it. Because if you don't know how to use it, if you have that barrier, then it's not going to get adopted, it's not going to be used, and it's not going to be a useful payment rail.
yeah.
So those are things that, how do you feel about the developer community? Is it growing? Do you see some promise there? Do you have any incentives for developers?
Yeah, we have the development community is growing. We've spent a lot of time on our documentation and just like tools around the development community just to make things easy for them. We have this effort where we have this community voted on prize essentially every so often, where people like can do projects out there in the community, and then the rest of the community votes on which ones they like the best, and then those win like some amount of lumens, right? And so that's been going on for a while and has been quite successful, and like lots of cool projects have been coming out of that. And we have other tiers of incentives like beyond that. But yeah, so it's been pretty positive overall.
So I guess we have about a minute left. Is there anything about sort of universal payments or payments around the world that you are really hoping to see over the next year or two? I mean, there's a lot of upheaval right now. We've got I think that the involvement of central banks in this, I think, is going to probably take a bit of a bite out of what independent cryptocurrencies are doing. I think that will be interesting. Where do you see it going, and what do you see some of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I would just like to see this kind of interoperable network at least start to work within a few geographies. I mean, we already have it kind of working between Nigeria and the UK. We would just like to add other areas to that, other regions, where basically people can easily send money cross border of any kind of amount, and it just happens like quickly. Yeah, that's what we're most focused on. We're building a consumer wallet that should kind of help facilitate that, and just being able to see that grow over the next year, I think is kind of what I'm most focused on. So great. I think she froze again. But thanks everybody. Thanks, Christy.